Payday hits on a Friday morning at 7:43 a.m., and you feel it before you even open the app. That small lift, that specific exhale that only happens twice a month. You check the balance. The number is there, the full number. 2 weeks of showing up and sitting through meetings and eating lunch at your desk and saying yes when you meant no, and the number is finally there in your account. And for approximately 4 minutes, everything feels fine. Then your phone buzzes. Rent autopay confirmed. Your stomach does not drop exactly. You knew it was coming. You always know it is coming, but the number is smaller now. Then the car insurance. Then the electric bill that was higher than last month for a reason you cannot immediately identify. Then the minimum payment on the card you have been carrying since February. Then the subscription you forgot was annual and not monthly. By Friday afternoon, the number that felt like relief at 7:43 in the morning is roughly 40% of what it was. You have not bought anything, you have not gone anywhere, you have not treated yourself to a single thing. The paycheck simply passed through your account on its way to everywhere else and left behind what it always leaves behind, which is just enough to get to the next one. This is not a story about irresponsibility. This is not a story about poor choices or weak willpower or a failure of character. This is a story about a system nobody taught you and a trap so well designed that the people inside it often cannot see its walls. You grew up watching adults work. You watched your parents leave in the morning and come home in the evening, and you understood from a very young age that work produced money and money paid for things, and that was the shape of how a life worked. Nobody sat you down and explained what happened between the paycheck arriving and the bills leaving. Nobody drew you a diagram of where the money was actually going and whether the destination served you or simply consumed you. You were taught to earn. You were not taught what to do with what you earned before the world told you what to do with it first. So you did what felt natural. You paid your obligations, you covered your needs, you allowed yourself the small pleasures that felt earned after another 2 weeks of the grind. And then you did it again and again. And somewhere in the repetition of doing it again, the years started passing in a way that is genuinely difficult to explain until you sit down and look at the math of where all the money actually went. Here is what makes the paycheck trap invisible while you're inside it. It never announces itself. It does not arrive as a crisis. There is no moment where everything collapses and you understand clearly that something has gone wrong. Instead, there is just the low, persistent hum of a life that is always almost fine. The bills are paid. The fridge is not empty. You can go out on a Saturday without calculating whether you can afford to. From the outside, and most days from the inside, the situation looks manageable. The trap does not feel like a trap. It feels like Tuesday. But here's what is actually happening underneath the surface of that manageable Tuesday. Every paycheck you receive is a decision about your future that gets made in the first 72 hours, whether you make it consciously or not. The rent takes its share, the utilities take their share, the subscriptions take their share, the groceries and the gas and the small purchases that individually feel completely reasonable collectively take their share. And by the time the first week of the pay period is over, the paycheck has already been distributed among today's obligations, and there is nothing left to argue with. The future did not get a vote. The future was not in the room when the decisions were made. The future simply received whatever was left over after everything else had been handled, and whatever was left over was usually somewhere between very little and nothing at all. This is the paycheck trap. Not drama, not disaster, just a quiet structural reality in which every dollar you earn gets immediately assigned to the present, and the future waits in a room it is never invited into. Now here's the thing that most people believe will solve this problem. They believe the answer is a higher salary, and this belief is so widespread and so logical on its surface that it is almost impossible to argue against until you watch what actually happens when the salary increases. You know someone who earns $50,000 a year and lives paycheck to paycheck. You might be that person. You also know someone who earns $80,000 a year and is somehow still counting days until the next deposit hits. There are people earning $120,000 a year who genuinely could not survive 6 weeks without a paycheck. Not because they're reckless, because the salary went up and the lifestyle went up to meet it. and the gap between what comes in and what stays behind never actually widened. This is the lifestyle inflation, and it is the most efficient trap ever built because it scales perfectly with income. You get a raise. The raise feels significant. For approximately 2 weeks, you experience a version of financial comfort that makes the number in your account feel genuinely different. And then, quietly, almost without you noticing, the life restructures itself around the new number. The apartment that was fine becomes slightly less fine now that you can afford slightly better. The car that was perfectly functional develops a new relevance now that the payment on something newer is within reach. The takeout that was a Friday treat becomes a Tuesday habit because why not? It's not like you can't afford it anymore. The raise gets absorbed. The lifestyle expands to the new ceiling. The paycheck trap does not get bigger. It just adjusts its dimensions to match your new salary and continues doing exactly what it was doing before at a higher price point. So the problem was never the amount of the paycheck. The problem was always what the paycheck was being used to build. And what most paychecks are being used to build is not wealth. They are being used to maintain a lifestyle that requires the next paycheck to keep running, which means the paycheck is not income, it's infrastructure. It's the thing that keeps today operational. And when keeping today operational consumes the entire paycheck, there is nothing left to build tomorrow with. Think about what that means across time, not across months, across decades. You work for 30 years, and every paycheck funds the present, and the future collects whatever the present doesn't consume, which is usually not much. And at the end of 30 years, you have the memories of 30 years of Tuesdays, and the house you rented, and the cars you paid off, then the vacations you took, and the credit card you finally cleared in 2019, and almost no transferable financial mass. The work was real. The effort was real. The money was real. It just passed through instead of accumulating. Here is where the psychology lives underneath all of this, because the paycheck trap is a psychological problem before it is a mathematical one. There is a specific feeling that arrives with every payday, and it is worth naming clearly. It is the feeling of having earned something. 2 weeks of alarm clocks and commutes and performance reviews and difficult conversations and small indignities absorbed without comment, and you have earned the right to feel okay. The paycheck is the evidence, and because you have been carrying the weight of the work for 2 weeks, the arrival of the money triggers a completely understandable impulse to reward yourself for having done it. The dinner out, the thing you saw online and added to the card 3 days ago, the upgraded version of something you already had but that now seems within reach. These are not failures of discipline. They are the natural human response to 2 weeks of deferred gratification arriving at once. But the reward is coming out of the same pool that your future needs access to. And your future does not have a voice in the room when Friday afternoon feels like permission. The people who build wealth quietly, without ever earning spectacular salaries, have learned something that changes this dynamic completely. They do not ask what the paycheck can buy today. They ask what the paycheck can buy them in 10 years. And then they answer that question before they answer any other one. This is what is commonly called paying yourself first, and it is described so often in financial conversations that it has started to sound like a cliche, which is unfortunate because it is actually the structural reversal that changes everything. Most people pay everyone else first: the landlord, the car company, the utility providers, the minimum balances, the subscriptions, and then they save or invest whatever is left after all of that, which, as we have established, is usually close to nothing. The quietly wealthy reverse the order. An amount goes to the future immediately when the paycheck arrives, not whatever is left, a predetermined amount. First, before the rent conversation, before the grocery run, before Friday dinner, the future gets paid, and everything else works around what remains. The amount does not need to be dramatic to work. This is the part that most people miss when they hear this advice and dismiss it because they believe they cannot afford to invest anything meaningful right now. $50 a paycheck, invested consistently in a low-cost index fund from age 25, produces something that saving alone cannot replicate, regardless of how much you save. And the reason is compound growth, which is the one financial concept worth understanding deeply because it is the only one that works for you in your sleep. Here is what compound growth actually
means in a life. You invest a small amount. That amount earns a return. The return gets added to the original amount. Next month, the return is calculated on the larger combined number. The month after that, it is calculated on a number that is larger still. This continues without your involvement. It does not require you to make smart decisions. It does not require you to monitor anything. It requires only that you start and that you do not stop. Given enough time, the math becomes genuinely extraordinary, not because of any single contribution, but because of the uninterrupted accumulation of many small ones. Two people, same salary, same city, same job title. One spends the full paycheck every 2 weeks for 20 years. One sends $150 to an index fund every payday for 20 years and spends the rest. At the end of 20 years, the difference between their financial positions is not explained by income. It is not explained by intelligence or discipline or luck. It is explained entirely by what happened in the first 48 hours after each paycheck arrived and whether the future had a reservation at the table or was left standing in the hallway.
Now let us talk about what financial freedom actually looks like for most people, because it is not what gets photographed and posted online. It is not a yacht or a penthouse or a car that costs more than a house in the town you grew up in. For most people, the financial freedom they are actually chasing looks like this: an unexpected bill arriving and not feeling the floor shift underneath you, a toxic job that you can leave without a 2-week countdown to disaster, a Saturday morning where you make plans based on what sounds good rather than what the checking account will allow, a night of sleep that does not include a mental inventory of what is due and when and whether it will clear, the ability to be generous with the people you love without calculating the cost before you say yes. That is the freedom. That is what the paycheck can buy if it is given the chance to build something instead of simply passing through. Every payday is a vote, not a dramatic vote, not a vote anyone else will see or acknowledge or applaud, but a vote nonetheless for the version of your life that exists 10 years from now or 20 years from now, or at the moment you are ready to stop working and need the work to have produced something that outlasts it. Most people think payday is the finish line, the reward for another 2 weeks of showing up, the moment the week earns its vindication. And in a sense, it is. The work was real, and the paycheck is evidence of it, and that deserves acknowledgement. But the quietly wealthy understand something that changes the entire meaning of the moment. Payday is not the finish line. It is the starting line. It is the moment you decide how much of today becomes tomorrow. The paycheck is not the trap. The trap is what happens when every paycheck disappears into the present before the future ever gets a chance to speak. The 7:43 notification is going to hit again in 2 weeks. The lift is going to come again. The exhale is going to come again. The only question is what happens in the 48 hours after it arrives, and whether this time the future is the first call you return instead of the last one.